On this episode of Militaria at the Museum, we dive into the story of HMCS Assiniboine. Next, we view the solemn memorial plaque of Captain Ross McKenzie, which honors his unwavering heroism at Passchendaele. Finally, we explore the Acemaker gunsight, an innovation that revolutionized the scope of aerial combat. Beyond museum exhibits lies a hidden realm of archived artifacts that hold the keys to unlocking intriguing stories from the past. Come along as I meet with experts at the Army, Naval, and Aviation museums, where I've been granted special access to pull back the curtains and reveal the secrets of their militaria. My name is Sandy Hiltz, and all my life I've been captivated by military history. Now, I have the rare opportunity to explore a collection of fascinating military artifacts on Militaria at the Museum. Today at the Navy Museum, I'm uncovering the history of a Kriegsmarine jacket, a distinct piece of uniform specifically designed for members of Nazi Germany's Navy. This jacket is deeply intertwined with the events of the Battle of the Atlantic, particularly the dramatic engagement between German submarine U-210 and the HMCS Assiniboine on the 6th of August, 1942. There are so many fascinating cases of compassion amidst conflict when we look back through the annals of history. I understand you have a particularly enlightening case here at the museum.
We do. We have a very unique item in our collection. It is a jacket that belonged to a U-boat submariner from U-210, which was on an individual named Hans Schmitz, and it was obtained in his capture when the U-boat was taken out. Would you like to see the jacket?
I'd love to.
Fantastic. Follow me.
Looking at this jacket, it certainly seems as if it's been through quite a bit of battle over the years. There's considerable wear along here and then a number of holes throughout the piece. What can you tell me about the story behind it?
If this jacket could talk, it would tell a unique story. Hans Schmidt was an ordinary sailor aboard U-210. He had joined early in the war and served as predominantly the mechanic on U-210, but also occasionally as a sous chef cook on board. The reason why it is the condition that it is because it belonged to a mechanic. He wore it all the time in the dirty engine room. They didn't have much opportunity to clean their clothes or take care of their clothes, so the condition of the jacket is a reflection of the individual's job and just the living conditions on board the U-boat.
So this is a really wonderful representation of what life would have been like aboard those U-boats. It was pretty tough.
Being a curator of the Royal Canadian Navy Museum, you're often influenced by the stories of the victories, the stories of the Allies, and the great feats and challenges that they met. It is very rare that we get to see the other side of war. The captain of U-210 had a very interesting history. He started off the war on a couple of large destroyers. He was engaged in some not ethical behavior and got demoted down to an ordinary sailor, served with a flank battery, and then because of the shortage of captains on U-boats, was quickly recommissioned as a captain onto U-210. And so when he boarded U-210 for the first time, the first thing he did was says to the crew, look, this is what's happened, this is my past, this is who I am. So Schmitz and his fellow crewmates were not necessarily the happiest crew when they left Kiel July 28, 1942, when they went on their first and final mission with U-210.
Right, and so how do we get from there to the sinking of U-210, and then how does this jacket make its way to the museum today?
So U-210's mission was to join a series of U-boats in a wolf pack to attack convoys headed from England to Canada.
And when we talk about wolf packs, that's a group of German U-boats or submarines that were sort of specifically sent out to harass and sink ships in a convoy, is that right?
They would kind of stalk them for a couple of days to assess how many ships were on the convoy, how they were moving and communicating with each other. And once they kind of figured that out, in the middle of the night, they would attack and torpedo the merchant vessels, which were their primary target. And in this particular case, on this attack of convoy SC94, they were very successful. There were 33 ships, and out of those 33 ships, that wolf pack successfully sunk 11 vessels before U-210 kind of slipped away from the convoy to go off on another mission.
So how did U-210 end up being found by HMCS Assiniboine?
So before the Assiniboine caught U-210, it was attacking a convoy called SC-115. And part of that attack process is that they would surface, torpedo, submerge. So U-210 spent a lot of time submerged. So when they were given orders to go ahead and attack SC-94, the convoy, U-210 was a little low on its electric energy. And so for a U-boat to recharge their electric components, all the mechanisms inside the U-boat, they have to surface and run the diesel engine. So unfortunately for U-210, they were on the surface, recharging their batteries when HMCS Assiniboine saw their cooling tower. When HMCS Assiniboine disabled U-210 in the famous battle that happened on August 6, 1942, Hans Schmitz was in the engine room on board the U-boat. And when the cooling tower was hit and the boat was disabled, he escaped through one of the torpedo tubes. He was actually one of the first ones out onto the surface, and so he was rescued by the Assiniboine because it was right there. When they were on board the Assiniboine, every POW was assigned a sailor. And in the case of Hans Schmitz, he was assigned to ordinary sailor Gordon Uptown McLean. They struck up quite a friendship, and I don't know if you want to call it camaraderie or just some human connection or compassion, because by the time Schmitz left the Assiniboine, he had given McLean this jacket as a thank you. That's very significant because when these guys went in the water and abandoned the U-boat, they had nothing on them but the clothing on their back. And so this jacket was the only thing that Hans had left from that U-boat, and he gave it to the sailor that took care of him.
In the almost 80 years that elapsed between when this jacket was captured and then when it was given to the museum, obviously it was very well cared for in that time and very much treasured within the family.
Yes, so the donor was the son of Gordon McLean. His name was John McLean. His father kept the jacket as a memento and a remembrance of that time because the Battle of Atlantic was a time of war. Human lives were lost. And I think it was a remembrance of that time and the sacrifices that were being made on both sides. And so when the family finally donated to the museum, it was with that story that it's to remember the loss and to remember the service of their father and the sacrifices people made.
Of course, it is that story that is the real value to this item.
Absolutely. I'm hoping within the next, 10, 15 years, when records are opened up, we can learn more about Hans Schmitz. What happened to him after he was a POW? Which POW camp did he land at? And where did he go after the war? Because I'd be very curious, not only know more about him, but then maybe one day hopefully connect with his family and say, hey, we have something that belonged to your family member in our collection.
Oh, that would be fantastic. I appreciate your showing it to me today. It's been a real pleasure to not only take a look and be able to handle a garment such as this, but to really dig back in that story and learn about the people behind it and the connections that were really formed even amongst enemies during the Second World War.
Having the U-boat jacket from Hans Schmitz in our collection is a wonderful reminder of the loss that Germany did suffer on the Atlantic. For the Royal Canadian Navy, from 1939 to 1945, we lost about 3,500 people on the Atlantic. For the Germans, they lost 28,000 out of the 40-some thousand that had joined to fight in the Battle of Atlantic. That's more than half of these individuals never went home. So Hans Schmitz's uniform is a reminder that human loss happened on both sides.
Up next, I'll share the story of Captain Ross McKenzie, who rose to command under intense fire during the Battle of Passchendaele. At the Army Museum, I'm learning about the story of Captain Ross McKenzie, a figure whose legacy is closely tied to the brutal and costly Battle of Passchendaele. McKenzie exemplifies the extraordinary courage that defined the Canadian Corps during this harrowing campaign.
The Battle of Passchendaele is also known as the Third Battle of Ypres, between the 28th of October and when the 85th come off the line late at night on October 31st. The Canadian Corps had advanced 1,000 yards despite the loss of thousands of lives. Passchendaele especially, with its horrors of mud, high artillery, the inability to get wounded and dead off the field, the memory of Passchendaele. It literally scars people for life.
And what would the role of the 85th Battalion be in Passchendaele?
The 85th are an infantry battalion. So the infantry's job after the preparatory bombardment of the Royal Canadian Artillery is to move across no man's land and to drive the Germans off what is known as Passchendaele Ridge.
What does this plaque commemorate, Kevin?
This plaque bears the names of the officers and men of the 85th Battalion that are killed in action between the 28th of October and the night of October 31st.
And this plaque, it stands in place of any known graves, is that right?
That's correct. The battlefield along Passchendaele Ridge is like porridge. So there is no time to take the dead off. You only have time, if you can, to get the wounded off, if you can do that. These people, their bodies have been destroyed by artillery fire, and what did remain of them has been swallowed up in the mud. So they have no known graves. Their names are all on the Menin Gate in the city of Ypres. One of the individuals in particular is Captain Ross McKenzie. Ross McKenzie is born in Bedeque, Nova Scotia, a remarkable young infantry officer of great courage and, as they would say back then, well-liked and regarded by all ranks. He is very much representative of the generation of Canadians, especially here in Eastern Canada, that went off and answered the call to save the world from ruin. Sandy, I'd like to introduce you to a colleague and pal of mine. This is Nick Drain. Nick is a member of the museum staff here. Nick's wearing the uniform that would have been on the backs of the majority of the members of the 85th Battalion in terms of the uniform and equipment, and he's holding the rifle and the bayonet that would have been used throughout the Passchendaele campaign.
Would you walk me through some of the distinguishing features of his uniform?
By 1917, almost all the Commonwealth troops are wearing this style of uniform. He has a slashed or cut, almost doublet style tunic. The distinctive thing about the Canadian Corps, this is why the Germans always know the Canadians, is, you turn to the side there, pal. We have our rockers here that say Canada, but we are the only group of troops in the Commonwealth services that have a division patch and a battalion patch. So everyone knows the Canadians alone just by these things.
And that's what instilled such fear into the hearts of the Germans.
After the Canadians are at the Somme, never-ending trench raids that they conduct, their ferocious use of the bayonet. Yes, the German Imperial knows, the Army knows this. Whenever the German troops look over across no man's land, because they gather intelligence as well, if these Canadians have come onto the line, they know something's going to happen. On the afternoon of October 28th, the forward elements of the 85th Battalion are moving into line. The 85th will be taking a place of a Western Battalion, the 44th Battalion. The standard operating procedure is one battalion would leave a forward line. A forward company, not a whole battalion, would come in behind them and take up their positions holding that section of the front. Now, when this occurs on the afternoon of the 28th, the Germans just across no man's land, they can see this movement. They can see the members of the 44th Battalion coming out of the line. So they mount an assault on that section of the trench line that's being held by members of the Canadian Corps. McKenzie very quickly sizes up the situation. If they stay and try to hold them one company against a battalion, they're going to be overrun. They're just like, literally, it's just the sheer weight of numbers. McKenzie orders drop packs, fixed bayonets. And this again is the turning point of how they'll hold the line in that place.
And did they manage to hold off the battalion of Germans?
Yes, they do. One company of Canadian infantry get up out of this section of their line and they charge into this battalion of German infantry. This breaks up this charge, breaks up this attack, and the Germans start to falter as they begin to withdraw. McKenzie is in the lead of all of this, bringing the troops together. He is then, as they say in the battalion records, riddled with bullets. McKenzie falls, mortally wounded, and they're well forward now of their line. McKenzie still maintains control of the company, getting outposts set up, directing the men. They eventually find that he expires on the battlefield. He basically bled to death. But the 85th Battalion had gone into the line. They mount their assault on the village of Zonnebeek on the 28th of October with 650 officers and men. They are withdrawn off the line in the late night of October 31st, early morning of November 1st. There are only 148 effective members of the battalion able to fall in. So you just imagine, you've gone into the line with 650 people. You come out of the line 3 days later, there's only 148 of you left. This is a big part of people who serve their countries, that go overseas and take part in foreign wars far from home. This is very much a part of what the Canadian Armed Services in both World Wars do. Ross McKenzie, again, is a long way from Nova Scotia. Now, this sort of knowledge, and again, how active they are, is something that a lot of British senior officers don't really like. There's a reference, you can find it, a British colonel who's writing in his battalion diary. Canadians have just moved in on our left flank. There'll be no rest now, right? Because when they come in, they're just at it all the time. The Corps never leaves the Germans alone. They're just at them all the time. Very, very aggressive. They know they can't go home until the war's over. And if they're going to pay with their lives and their friends' lives this far from home, they're going to really make it a high price. The concept of service to do for others, that's what this all boils down to.
Serving king and country.
Well, serving each other. By this time in the war, they're not thinking about king and country anymore. They're thinking about themselves and to go home.
Thank you, Kevin and Nick, for sharing with me this story that highlights the brave actions of not only Captain McKenzie, but all those who gave their lives in service of king, country, and each other.
Quite proud to be able to share this story with you and everybody that might be watching.
Up next, I'll look at the Acemaker gunsight, a game-changing innovation that allowed pilots to target with unprecedented precision. Today at the Aviation Museum, I'm exploring the GGS Mark II gunsight, an innovative piece of technology that played a crucial role in the aerial battles of the Second World War. Guided by aviation expert Mark People, we'll explore the ingenuity behind this crucial innovation, designed to significantly enhance the accuracy of fighter pilots during the intense dogfights of the war. The Spitfire is unquestionably one of the most recognizable planes in history. It harkens back to those incredible aerial battles of the Second World War. But tell me, Mark, what was it that made the Spitfire such an effective fighter?
Well, the Spitfire is sort of the epitome of World War II fighters. Everyone knows what a Spitfire is. Unfortunately, we don't have a Spitfire as much as I would love to be able to have one and get you in a cockpit of one. But we do have a selection of models that sort of show the evolution of the Spitfire from roughly 1936 right through to the end of the war in 1945. Spitfire obviously was evolved over the time. They did modifications, different engines. They also looked at different systems to make it a better aerial fighting machine. And I think I've got an example of that technology that I can show you that made the Spitfire the fighter it was.
I'd love to go see that.
Okay, well, let's go look.
It's always exciting when you get to see even a piece of a Spitfire, Mark. Tell me, what is this and where would it be found in the aircraft?
So this is a GGS Mark II D gunsight. The Acemaker gunsight is a gyro gunsight. It's basically a technological development that came into use in late 1943 that changed the way that Allied fighter pilots could aim their weaponry on their aircraft. This would be found in a Spitfire in front of the pilot, and it would be his main aiming point, and this would be how he would actually fire his guns and where he'd aim his guns at. It's an interesting piece of technology in the sense that this has been designed to counter-effect the way that the pilots were shooting earlier in the war. The innovation that the GGS brought to a fighter pilot was it enabled them to accurately sight their guns versus before they were actually trying to estimate where the target was. This came into effect in 1943, and it was by that point, it was a piece of technology that was certainly changing the way that they were fighting, and they were becoming much more accurate with aiming. It was a complex part of the fighting system of an aircraft like the Spitfire.
Given the fact that you are now firing directly at your target, this innovation must have massively increased the accuracy and the efficacy of these weapons.
It did, and it gave the pilots a different sort of advantage to do it. But it also is a fairly complex piece of technology as well, too, which all of a sudden the pilots had in their hands, which obviously is something new that they had to learn to use it. But what we're seeing here is also just the gun sight itself, but also there were actually other controllers that were connected throughout the cockpit that he had control of this. So it sits in front and it's lit up, projected an image up on the glass, and that was generated by a piece of equipment in there called a graticule. The graticule was a round piece with diamonds on it, and that effectively lit up when it was hit with light, and it provided the aiming point for that gun sight to shoot, and then you'd be able to point it directly at the aircraft he was shooting at. The gun sight was considered a leap forward for the pilots to be able to accurately hit their targets. The gun sight was widely used throughout the Allied Air Forces. The U.S. Army Air Corps used it as well as the U.S. Navy, and they had their own versions of it. There was a general acceptance that it was the right way to go.
So we've talked about the fact that before this technology, pilots wouldn't have been firing directly at their targets. What would their gun sights have looked like in those earlier versions?
Effectively, it would just be a lighted sight with one, as they call them, graticule, that would come up, and that would be your aiming point.
Knowing that this was quite a step forward and actually made things easier, did it require much training on the part of the pilot to move to this new technology?
Pilots would have to understand how to sight the gun sight with the right distance, so they would actually have to tune that gun sight just prior to firing, but it was relatively easy because they knew that once they did that, they were probably going to get a hit right away with it.
So how many rounds would an aircraft like a Spitfire be carrying, Mark?
Probably about 3,000, probably that sort of number. If you held that gun firing button down for any long period of time, you would literally just use all your ammunition.
So the increased accuracy of these also allowed you to save that valuable ammunition.
Right. And the other thing that this was kind of revolutionary in a lot of sense was that in addition to using it in fighter aircraft, they actually put these in bomber command aircraft, in the gun turret.
The large number of aircrafts that used this technology really seems to speak to its effectiveness, Mark.
Ultimately, the gyro gun sights led to other developments, which would be radar-assisted gun laying, but it would be in relation to this as well, too, that would provide the sighting that would give you that next step. And this is a weapon system, and it's an integral part of a fighter aircraft. It is a weapon of death, but at the same time, it's an integral part of a bigger weapon system.
So how long was this technology in its current form here used?
This gun sight was used right up to probably the early 50s, not late 50s, but again, it was particularly good for what they needed to do. And also you could adjust it to what exactly you're doing. If you were actually firing rockets or you're firing guns, and you could actually do that. And on this particular example, you see RP on here, and that's actually rocket projectile. So you could dial in and shoot rockets off.
So it was a very versatile piece of equipment.
Right, and you know, the technology inside is fairly cutting edge, and also the use of the optics. The glass is very important, so you can project that image well.
So this comes out of use sort of in the early 1950s, Mark. What's following it? Is it just a newer version of this?
This stays in place probably till about early 1950s, but in post-war world, there are other things that they were looking at, and what we look at here is illuminating the information onto a glass. And that's sort of an early form of the heads-up display, or HUD as they call it. It's all about projecting that image up. Now, modern-day HUDs use projecting up all your instruments onto that, including your flight altitude and whatever else, in addition to targeting it as well, too.
Mark, thank you so much for showing this to me today. It's been great to see a piece of a real-life Spitfire, and also look through the evolution of these different gun sighting mechanisms, and this, which is such an important step on the way to those systems that we know today.
It's a great piece that we're able to show here today because it does it's the earliest sort of evolution of the heads-up display and also what is used today. And this is 1943 technology, which again shows the innovation and the sort of technical expertise that was being produced at that point.
Absolutely, and you can see how this sort of technology and these innovations went a long way to that establishment of the aerial supremacy of the Allied forces towards the end of the Second World War. Having special access to go beyond museum exhibits reveals some of history's best-kept secrets and most interesting stories. Thank you for joining me in this exploration of military artifacts on another episode of Militaria at the museum.